Years later, after recovering from multiple crises and 2 near-death experiences, a drowning and a lightning strike, making a fortune and building relationships in a community, and then seeing it all slip away. After 10 years of deep searching, finally, a new perspective has evolved in my life. Let me share the good news I discovered. Most notably, from the window into our reality from these 2 near-death experiences. I'm Mark Roach. I'm here to help you get what you want, what you need, and to understand the difference. Have you ever questioned the nature of your reality? What if I told you that much of what you believe is true is actually an illusion? I drowned to death about 15 years ago, and then shortly after that I was struck by lightning. I don't have any fancy stories about, purple people coming and working on me or taking me away in spaceships. I just have a blank period. And coming to and realizing that I had been in the abyss and that I was fortunate in some respects to have been brought back to life. And I didn't really understand why this had happened to me or why I was here, and I really had an existential crisis. And as I looked deeper into what had happened over the past, 40 years or so prior to that, I saw a number of crises that I had encountered and endured and lived through, and I just kept going and pulling myself back together again to continue in my life, which was really focused around trying to help others, taking care of some of my own personal needs along the way, and of course following my own inner calling. And if you've listened to some of my other videos, you understand how important my personal calling is and how it has driven me throughout my life and through thick and thin, through trials and errors that I've made and different experiments in life to find my way. So these 2 near-death experiences shattered my reality, and they gave me insight and a chance to reflect deeper on as to what was really going on. And they also gave me a glimpse into other crises that I had had in the past in my life. I'm not going to try to explain all of that work and my methods of investigating that in this video, because I'm basically just trying to give you a snapshot and some of the things that I learned and you might be able to use and benefit from in your life. But that personal near-death experience shattered my perception of reality. And one of the things that I discovered is that we have this illusion of control. And then I went on to explore and actually reached out to a neuroscientist who happened to have made some YouTube videos, and I think he even did some TED Talks that resonated with some of the conclusions that I was coming to, that we don't have as much control over our lives as we believe that we have. And his name is Moran Cerf. And I spoke to him on a Zoom call during COVID, had a lengthy conversation, and he basically confirmed, whether he knew it or not, I'd already been studying this stuff for a long time, but his research on people who were in the hospital and had brain injuries allowed him to go in and put some test nodes into their into their brain, and they would ask the people questions, and they would respond, and then they would also put different apparatus in front of them that would let them make choices, and they would watch their response and the timing of their response, and then they would also sit back and listen to their explanation of what had happened. And this neuroscientist, Moran Cerf, he's also a Google consultant, and I think he also teaches at Northwestern about marketing. He's a very fascinating person, I think he was a software hacker before he became a doctor of neuroscience, and then he went on to use all of the things that he had learned from hacking, software development, in science, and then his neuroscience investigations, taking that to the business school at Northwestern. So, as you can imagine, he's probably a very busy man today with AI and science and all of the things all the data that we've collected on humans from our cell phone data tracking. But anyway, his studies demonstrate that we create narratives after the fact to explain outcomes as if we chose them. So that means if there's an incident that happens in front of you, you'll create a narrative that explains it, and you may explain it as if something was in your control, and you may use it to basically parrot a belief system or a perspective that you carried into the scene. So in reality, many factors outside of our awareness influence the chain of events that we see happening in our lives. And we overestimate the impact of our choices. We overestimate the impact of our choices in directing the outcomes. So this creates a false sense of certainty about how things work. So this aspect of our humanity puts most of us to sleep. We just don't have the diligence to understand reality through our senses. There's a philosopher or a mystic that I've studied named Gurdjieff. I think he was a Middle Eastern Russian mystic, and I think he passed away in around 1950 and did a lot of his work in the early 1900s. And Gurdjieff did a lot of work. He even worked with Carl Jung and some other writers and psychologists to develop methods to understand our reality and to optimize our human potential. And one of his methods was to remember yourself, and which was basically a meditation practice to reflect on your life. It mirrors some of the work that Rudolf Steiner speaks of. He was a German spiritualist, and he developed some concepts around expanding our ability to connect with all of the feelings and sensory apparatus that we have in our bodies, much of which has been neglected. But back to the point here about using your senses, I mean, most of us, have fallen asleep. We are listening to the 24/7 narrative that's running on CNN or Fox or one of these major news networks that's broadcasting a narrative 24/7, stories over and over and over again from selected viewpoints. And every person, if you've listened to my other videos, you know that I've been around a lot of rich and powerful and influential people. A lot of them, when they have their fortune, they go out and they get involved in media because they're really trying to control the narrative that the populace is listening to and is influenced by. So unless something very traumatic happens, like what's happened to me over and over in my life, you really don't pay attention to this stuff, and you may not find the necessity of trying to uncover it and figure it out. I mean, there's been people that have gotten away with, molesting people, young boys, girls, using their positions of authority and power to feed their greed and their sexual desires behind the scenes. They've gotten away with that forever because of people's either inability or powerlessness or helplessness or their blindness to what's really going on. And now there's a level of transparency in our society through social media, and even a video like this, even if this thing only gets 10 views, it's still getting a message out there that would never have been told even 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. Not to mention 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago, when many of these stories that transcend our whole community today are being repeated over and over again. So there's many traditions and structures that have evolved because of this suppression of our primal nature that's hiding behind what we really are experiencing in our lives. I mean, there's things going on in our families, in our communities, and in our relationships that we don't understand and we just don't know how to deal with. And we're just learning how to do that. But the systems have been maintained by the elites to minimize chaos from the sex and violence. As I mentioned, the transparency is now revealing the brutality and the arrogance behind these facades. You're being played. We all have egos, and we all want to believe that we're right. We all want to believe that we have a safe home, that we have a safe family, that we operate in a way that is acceptable, and that we adhere to the norms of our society. And let's face it, we may very well be involved in one of the greatest societies on earth here in the United States, where we do have some values that a lot of us feel strongly about and feel like are worthy of defending. Yet, the silence that and the blindness that we have about some of these aspects of our reality is threatening to take those away. The victims who were silenced are now speaking out, and it's undermining some long-held beliefs. And the idea that the truth will set you free, the belief in the supernatural, allows a transcending nature to our reality. So you've certainly heard the statement, the truth will set you free. And I think that term has been used a lot, maybe misused in some cases, because many times the truth to one person steps on the toes of another person. And, let's just say you have, a Muslim who believes in Islam and another one next to him that's a Christian that believes in Christ, and then maybe a Buddhist over here, and maybe another one that doesn't believe in any of that stuff. How can those coexist? Well, let's examine the spiritual realm. Our spiritual design gives us access to our true being. And I do find myself, of course, I was raised as a Christian, but with a skeptical view of how the Christian practices were being carried out dogmatically. in a church and in organized religion. But I do believe that there is an intelligence in our universe and in nature, and there is a survival mechanism built into us that is far superior than our primal nature, but it does use naturally, our being a human being, we are made at our core with a survival instinct and certain biological needs. And then there's a higher aspect of ourselves that is our spiritual nature. Somehow, and this is far beyond my full understanding, we are made in God's image. And I do find that we are caught between these primal urges and this higher spiritual awareness. And as we live our lives, we play out in the material plane this back and forth between the two. And, the Bible speaks of these unseen spiritual forces, a battle between good and evil. And if you look at like Ephesians 6:12, there's a statement that my father liked, which was called, "Our struggle is against the rulers, authorities, and powers of this dark world." And then there was another one in 1 Peter 5:8. It warns that the devil is like a roaring lion for someone to devour. A roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And the answer to that for the Christian is that Christ has already won the ultimate victory over these forces. So what if your perceived reality is a comforting illusion? What if all those stories that you've heard are repeated over and over and over again and used to manipulate you and to protect you from truths that your body, that your survival instincts may not be prepared to handle in the moment? And so what if this narrative that you've been living your life by is an inaccurate narrative? Will you choose to seek the deeper truths, even if it means facing hard realities? I mean, can you make this decision from your head? Would you invite the trauma to open up and create wounds inside of you that demand that you explore reality, yourself, relationships, and the fabric of everything that is holding your sanity and your life together? True freedom comes from aligning with spiritual truths beyond these illusions and the lies of this world. So today I challenge you to question your assumptions, to simply use your senses fully, open your eyes, and seek a genuine connection to your spiritual source. I'm Roach, Mark Roach. All the best.